All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Thursday, September 10th, 2020, 5:30 p.m. As authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code, this meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of seeking confidential legal advice from the city attorney on any agenda item herein. The City of Rowlett reserves the right to reconvene, recess, or realign the regular session or called executive session or order of business any time prior to adjournment. Due to the public health emergency and to conform with social distancing requirements, the city meetings will be held via teleconferencing. The public can view live on the city's website or RTN 16. If you'd like to listen to the meeting live, you can call 877-853-5247 and enter meeting number 814-0130-1713. And if you want to provide public comment, we asked you to email it by noon today. Laura, did we get any public comment?
No, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So our first item on the agenda, other than to call the meeting to order, is item 2. Here a presentation from Brinkley Sargent Widgeton Architects regarding a facilities needs assessment for the city of Rowlett. So, Brian, I assume you're going to start us off. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Mayor, I will kick us off, and then we'll turn it over to Brinkley Sargent. Council, tonight we're going to hear a presentation from Brinkley Sargent Widgeton Architects regarding the facility assessment they have conducted. As you know, designing, financing, and building new facilities is a time-consuming process, and to know which facility should be built first and which one should wait needs to be a strategic decision. This is all about part of our strategic planning, particularly as we have these 3-year bond cycles, you've got to plan out for your facilities for our ultimate build out. Tonight, we're going to get feedback, just to make sure that everyone has an understanding of the assessment. Just note that although that feedback is welcome, decision points are not expected tonight. We will meet again with council in the near future for decisions. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brinkley Sargent. We have a presentation tonight. I think they will encourage you to stop them and as they go. There's an awful lot of information to cover. We set it up for 2 hours, but if we need to go 5 or 6 hours, that's perfectly fine. Dwayne, are you going to lead us off tonight?
Will somebody be pulling up the PowerPoint that we have?
Yeah, Laura, here we go.
There we go. It would be my preference to be there in person, meeting everybody at the city, but we all know things aren't perfect today. So we'll move through it this way. Myself and Gina Irwin, who you'll hear from briefly, have been involved with this process for a substantial amount of time. And we've had an opportunity to work with cities probably for the last 20 years or so in helping cities understand their future needs. And that's essentially what we were looking at today. So we go to the next slide. But there we go. Thank you. So the needs assessment process, real briefly, and I would add that this is a summary. Tonight we're talking about. There's a lot of details in the final report, but we wanted feedback from certainly the council to understand how we may continue to complete this report. So the needs assessment is basically we're planning the future facility needs to build out. And what it does, it creates a roadmap for future staffing. But one thing that we need to remember is that this is not a budgeting process, but more a needs and space allocation requirement. So budgeting will happen as the city goes along. It considers population projections and how that translates to staffing and then to functional space needs in future facilities. The space needs are quantified in square footages, which translates to facility needs based on which facilities we put together, and eventually site and budget requirements. So when the city is ready to start the design stage, the needs assessment is used as a guidebook, which may need to confirm appearance of future issues and adjust program spaces projections. COVID is a perfect example of that. Who would have thought of that a year ago? But now we're having to look at that relative to what does it mean long-term to offices and public buildings. Process is a process that, again, we've done for many years. And Rowlett staffing was tested against comparable cities in size and demographics, and we'll show you that information so you can get comfortable that what some of your staff are saying they need is very consistent with what we found over with cities that will be your ultimate build out. I guess the only other thing to add is, you're in an enviable position where you're growing fast, and luckily working in the DFW marketplace extensively, as well as across the country, we've had a chance to work with high growth areas. So that really helps us as we look forward to the staffing and their organizational structure as they change. Next slide, please. So where we are now is we analyzed the current departments and determined future needs for City Hall, police, fire, parks, public works, and courts. And we looked at staffing needs for 10 and 20-year population growth. 20-year obviously will be changed based on what the needs of the city are and how it grows. But it's a real good benchmark to start understanding what the total square footage you might need. We determined building and parking needs for staff and city services as well. And the parking need will be based on which buildings might be co-located together, let's say. And therefore, we look at the step 4, which is starting to develop budget option and site development exhibits. And that's really where we're at today. Is we're through step 3, and as city manager identified, there will be some discussion about priorities and also site development potential that you might have for your growth. And with that, we'll develop budget and associated exhibits for public safety, public works, and any other satellite facilities that we might have. So going to the next slide, I'd like to start out with some general observations as we've been able to spend a lot of time with staff. Luckily, we were able to talk to staff before everything hit. So we visited with staff on numerous occasions. Also looked at your facilities, and the good part is Rowlett has been very efficient in the use of its facilities today. Repurposing facilities, reusing facilities, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know there, but extremely efficient. Majority of your facilities have reached their useful life without a significant reinvestment in the facilities to extend their use. Most of your facilities have quite a bit of age on them, and that's just a natural growth process as you with a city like yours. And since staff has grown and facilities have not, what's happened is a lot of the support spaces have been used for staff to go into. There's examples would be conference and storage rooms were sacrificed for new staff. Therefore, you're starting to get a more and more dense square footage per staff, which is artificially low. And what happens is when you start looking at area projections for new facilities, you start correcting that staff ratio while providing the needed functional spaces for modern municipal facilities. That means a portion of the area increase in facilities is for support and a portion is due to staff addition. And when Gina reviews an example of these, you'll see that we not only look at staff and what kind of square footage they need, but also what kind of support areas the staff need within that department. So that's really what I'm speaking about when I'm talking about that. Gina, I think you're going to take us through kind of the methodology and how we went through the process a little bit. And it'll be the next slide. Gina, do we have you? Maybe we lost Gina.
You're on mute, Gina.
Gina, you're muted.
I hit it, I apologize. I hit it twice in a row. It's a little too fast on the trigger.
Okay.
Apologize. So this is just to reiterate some of what Dwayne started to mention, that we've met with staff, able to sit down with each department at least 3 times and looked at staffing growth potential in the near term of 10 years, and then looking longer term, 20 years, which we really are considering more of the build out population and staffing limit or horizon for Rowlett. We walked through all the facilities. Obviously, as we met with departments, we usually met within their space or at least once in their space to see how they work and how the public interacts with them if they have a high volume of public interaction. And we've gone through and looked at our first run of space calculations with all of the staff to see that we've got our staffing numbers and spaces that go with those staff members and functions already there, which is what you'll see today. And then our next step is to look at ways that there might be space savings if functions are put together in some of the facility options we'll discuss towards the end of the presentation, that we might trim out some of that square footage you'll see in this presentation. So those are steps that we anticipate still to go through. So we'll go to the next slide. Now, as I mentioned, we were looking at 10-year and 20-year growth from 2019. And so at that point, we used a current population of just over 66,000. And with our planning horizons for 10 and 20 year, we used 80,000 for 2029 and just over 100,000 for 2039, essentially looking at that as your build out number. And these numbers were provided from city staff for the comprehensive planning documents. Next slide, please. And just as a reminder for the facilities that we were considering, these show the downtown campus, of course, all of the city hall and annex, the library location, police and court facility, fire administration, community development, public works and animal shelter properties, the Parks and Rec administration and community center. And then also we looked at park maintenance out at Community Park. And next slide, please. And this is just a quick overview of our opinion on what the existing facilities are providing for you and for your staff and public, just as a grading for what seemed to be the level of workspace environment from a scale of 0 to 10, and then physical condition. The highlighted 2 facilities, community development is obviously a newer facility and has been recently remodeled to accommodate community development and their needs. So, of course, looking at it from the outside, they're in really good shape at this point. The fire admin building has maybe not the best of physical condition, but as far as space, there is some accommodation that could be made. I'm sure there's some tweaks to it that are definitely needed, that would be make things a lot better for them. And that's true, of course, of all the departments. Public Works, that property and what it could be in the future is one of the reasons we have that highlighted. Whether the physical condition and the constraints there are pretty limited for Public Works, which we'll go into a little bit later as far as what's there, but it's maybe an asset of consideration for the city, and that's why we just considered it as a highlight. One thing we did not list on this facility assessment would be the library, since that's a lease space. And Maureen Arndt, who's on our team as the library consultant, will also present her interactions and findings for the library, and that'll be part of this presentation, so she'll be part of it later. So we left that, we left the library out, especially since it is a lease space, and she'll go into more detail for you when we get to that portion of the presentation. So Laura, if you could go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the factors that we considered when we met with staff and talked to them about how they would grow, is what their service levels would be for the future, and then obviously how could they work very efficiently amongst themselves within the department and staff to staff, but also to the public. And so those factors were reviewed as we looked at the staffing numbers. And if you'll go to the next slide, this is a summary of, which is in quite a bit of detail, and hopefully you have a printed copy of this number, but we just went from today, or the current population and your staffing today, and talked with each department about how they might grow and change over time for those same factors as I mentioned. And of course, your question might come up of, well, how do we, if you'll just advance, just Laura, thanks. So how does Rowlett, how do you compare to similar cities for these staffing levels? And so the next slide just adds on to what Rowlett's growth and numbers are. We talked with staff and determined what cities in the Metroplex really were best reflective of where Rowlett would like to be, or at least targeting. And we looked for cities with 100,000 as their population. And of course, in certain cases, such as McKinney, we had to go back in time to when they were close to 100,000. And we've had a long history of working with the city of McKinney for many planning projects. And so the staffing information we had was from our previous studies with McKinney. And we also looked at Allen, at their population near 100,000 back 2 years ago, and then Louisville and their population and staffing at 105,000, which was from 2019. Also just wanted, oh, go right ahead, sorry.
You mind pausing here? I just want to give council a chance to react to this or ask questions, since this is kind of fundamental to kind of the sizing that we're going to talk about of facilities and stuff going forward.
Definitely. I was going to add on just that fire operations, which is a pretty large number as far as a total for city staffing, that number has been left out of this grouping. And really the only component for fire that we were focused on, as you can see, about a third of the way down the chart, was fire admin, emergency management, prevention, and training. And so those are the only staff numbers that we were looking at for the future.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes. So this study also include Sapphire Bay as part of the growth portion, right?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
Sure.
So, I think
we need to look at this page in a lot more detail and have opportunities to ask questions, but we're not really here to nitpick on staffing needs, in projections into 2029 and 2039. When I studied this in pretty much in depth, I didn't see any glaring errors that would cause issues with facility assessment needs, but certainly it raised a lot of questions for me that I think, we can go through at some other time if that's appropriate or whenever that's appropriate, Brian.
It is, Mayor.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the police force and, you want to look at, crime stats and how does that make sense? And you look at community development and you're going, why is McKinney at 100 staff and, Allen's at 36 and we're projecting 36. And so there's just things like that, which I'm hoping that y'all spend a lot of time going through that kind of analysis with the consultants and understanding why you came up with, 35.5 for Rowlett community development when McKinney had 100.5. But I don't know how much value there is to get into that detail right here, right now.
No, and Mayor, I agree, and believe me, we vetted this quite a bit, and then even later, once I saw this chart for the first time, even through staff and through our consultant, the reasoning that behind this is just simply to acknowledge the fact that Rowlett's final growth is within sight. If we were a very young city and you're still 40 more years of growth, it's one thing. But when you see the potential that we could hit our final growth as early as maybe even between the next 10 years or so, then you start to see that that I don't want to say light at the end of the tunnel. That's not what I mean. But you start to see from a planning perspective that we've got to prepare for this. We've got to be ready for it. Sapphire Bay is one thing, but North Shore, when it starts to build out, it could go quickly as well. And so what I really appreciated that Brinkley Sargent did was give us cities that would be somewhere in that range of where we may end up. We may end up at 90, 95, 100. But that was very eye-opening to me, even though I do realize that from time to time, cities can be very, very different. Garland, for example, is right next door to us, and they own their own electric, and most cities don't in Texas. So, but anyway, that was my only comment.
Council, any questions or comments about this slide before we move on? I think we're good, Brian.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the next slide. It really is
Yeah,
well,
I don't know what the blue and orange means on this slide.
that's unusual. It showed up in my my version. I apologize for that. The blue is the 2039 numbers for Rowlett, and the orange is the average of those three comparable cities, Allen, Louisville, and McKinney at 100,000. So it's just a graphic representation of what that chart was on the average.
There's a couple of issues in the presentation I got. This is one of them. So if you could just accumulate those and send Brian a new one so he could get us a new one after this, tomorrow or next week.
Sure. I apologize. It must be something with fonts maybe that has dropped, but we'll get that corrected.
Is this a PDF version?
I believe it is. That may be the problem instead of it being the PowerPoint.
This is actually the PowerPoint that was on the Google Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next slide then. Then the next step that we took when we were talking with staff after looking at their potential growth was what type of workspace would be required for each individual position to accommodate within a new potential new facility. And so these are just some examples that we utilized as we sat down with staff. We showed them exhibits of potential workstation, footprint spaces within a department, as well as private offices. So you see some examples there, and we lay out furniture to see the type of desks layout and space that would be needed, guest chairs when those are needed. If a conference space was needed within an office, we also had larger offices to accommodate that function. And then, of course, we talked about the need for conference rooms and who would have access to those and who might use them exclusively or have shared access to conference rooms. And so that was talked about with each department.
One of the overriding things to talk about is the, we're all aware that, desire to go paperless, and that's dramatically impacted, if you look at perhaps older city halls with their massive amounts of file space, not only in their office, but also just a file room, let's say. One of the things that has started happening is that with the paperless, you're starting to see offices become a little bit more efficient relative to size. And this reflects that. Also, the technology side of the equation as well continues to affect that. So all those thought processes is not only what's happening now, but what's going to be happening in the future is viewed when we start looking at these office spaces and requirements.
Okay. So, next slide, please. So we'll just do a little bit of a breakdown for the departments that were included in what we would consider City Hall components. So some of these, just as an overview, some of the common shared spaces or unique aspects to what were considered as the numbers came together for City Hall were, of course, to look at consolidating customer service under one roof and bringing community development into the City Hall as a facility instead of being a satellite location. These numbers, of course, I'll preface this again as we did earlier, Dwayne did, about the pre-COVID discussion. Obviously, some of the meeting spaces numbers you'll see, those are based off of just life as it was before COVID. So we haven't made any adjustments, and whether there's any thinking to that, that of course could be up for discussion maybe at the end. But what we looked at was trying to accommodate a large meeting room for up to 140. This is separate from council chambers. Council work session space, an executive session / conference executive conference room, actual office and workspace for council and mayor to utilize within City Hall. We also have improved staff amenities within the City Hall's footprint to have staff cafe or break room space, quiet rooms, lactation rooms, that sort of thing. And then also we've brought economic development within City Hall. Next slide, please. And this is an example of what we've developed for each department. We just taken human resources as a snapshot to give you an example of, if you look at the main chart on the right side, this is what we have as our program page, and under on the list in the middle of this slide essentially has a list of all the different spaces, or it's called space description. And so we looked at, for instance, a waiting room for visitors who come into HR, space there for small, small workstations or carrels for anyone who needs a computer access or to sign up for anything or fill out employment, do benefits, that sort of thing. Public conference room also, just a small conference room for 14 people. Again, with computer access, as Dwayne mentioned, technology and audiovisual are interwoven into this building and will be planned out as part of it. And then it goes into staff spaces and what type of workspace they need, whether that's a workstation or a private office for all the current staff as well as future staff. And then some of the support spaces such as a training room, which is highlighted down there, a training room for 18 people. That would also be a space that would be utilized by the IT department for their training. Those might be the main users, but also, of course, it's a multi-purpose space that can be used by other departments. And a work copy space within their department, and then if any secure files, a secure file room, and that capacity was discussed with staff. So on the left is just an overview of the changes to the projections. So you see in the light blue number, the square footage for the department itself would be just over 3,000 by 2029. And the only jump up to 3,208 by build out is just for one additional staff added in this department. And then just there's the recap of the staff growth. And so this is just to show that each department, this is what we went through and the information that would be gleaned from looking at each department page, but we're not going to we're not going to go through that as a tedium for you today. And so the next slide really shows the summary of all of those departments or what we captured under City Hall.
Jana, if I could, you might explain the 45% at the bottom of that sheet.
Okay. If
We
you
can go
could,
back one. There you go.
sorry. We, on different departments, depending on the type of space and the number of people, we put a gross circulation factor. It's not always 25%, just in this example, it is. And it's not a net 25%, it's a gross. And I can explain that, but what that entails really is all the walls to within the space as well as hallways connecting or corridor space to get from one room to the other. So that really captures the big bubble for that department. And then once we go into, does that cover everything, Dwayne, you were thinking?
Yeah,
Okay.
it explains what that gross factor is. It's basically just allows each department to actually operate with the circulation and wall thicknesses.
Right.
And we've gone back and prepared audits on city halls we've done to come up with these numbers so we can be as accurate as possible on those numbers.
Okay. So this is a summary for all of the departments in City Hall and particular spaces, functional spaces, such as you can see on that top line, lobby / community / training space. So, and then council chamber, its square footage needs, the city manager's office. We've inserted a set of office space for city attorney, the city secretary's suite, HR, IT, finance, and all of the others that are listed here that would be within this larger number for the entire building. And then the last two spaces before we subtotal is the staff support spaces, which I mentioned. Some of the quiet rooms and cafe break spaces are incorporated into that. And then building support space would be those mechanical and electrical spaces that are necessary to make the building work, as well as janitor closets, supply rooms, general storage rooms, things that just will help the building to serve your needs over the long time that you'll be occupying the building. Then we do a net subtotal for all of those departments, and then bringing this into a public realm of a building. some of the circulation factors are again seen because of the nature of a larger open spaces and needing to have people move through the building with a general circulation factor, and then also vertical circulation within the building and any mechanical vertical shafts and that sort of thing, as well as the envelope of the building for the thickness, whatever that finish may be. And so those are those factors added on to the final number. Looking at 60,734 by 2029 to house the staffing of 117 and a half, and then to ultimate build out at 2039 for 126.5 staff at 62,145.
Can we pause there for a second, please?
Sure.
So I'm not sure who I'm asking this question, so I'm going to ask it to Brian first. Somewhere I would like a summary of the square footage in the facilities that we currently have. And I did not see it in this presentation. So, what do we have in the police department and court building? What do we have in community development? What do we have in City Hall, although that's pretty irrelevant. So it would help with decision-making soon of understanding how we can use existing facilities as we phase this in.
Gina or Dwayne, I think y'all have that because I think I've asked some of those same questions.
I didn't see it in this presentation, though. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct. We did not focus on that here, but it's a great question, and we'll certainly provide it for you.
Yeah, as I go through this and we're going, this is the needs, and you start to figure out how to phase these needs in, you gotta have all that information.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for City Hall portion here? If not, we can move forward. And so then under the police department, part of what was, unfortunately, this is going to the mayor's comment about there was an issue with the text, it seems to be. The numbers here for facility summary say the police headquarters at 75,505, which includes police holding facilities as well as external support buildings for things such as the sensitive vehicles, some of the larger items that need to be stored for property and evidence, and those types of things that it's easier to pull them out of the main building to lower the cost per square foot on those types of spaces, get them out of the main building. And then we looked at what square footage for possible lease space at Sapphire Bay might be necessary or advantageous for the department to have. And so that number is down towards the bottom of the central chart. And so the number would be 2,327 for lease space, with 11 personnel to be located there. So those numbers add up to a total of 77,832 for all of the police components, headquarters as well as a substation at Sapphire Bay.
Can you explain lease space for the Sapphire Bay? Why is that there?
Just assuming that that's space that the city would lease from the developer, unless there is something else that is to be built specifically. I know on the fire department concerns, there may, that would be a totally different animal. And if police is considered to become a joint substation at Sapphire Bay, this would still qualify as space that would work for the police operations out of that location.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was the lease word that caught me off guard.
Sure. Okay.
And just Blake, for you to know, when and I'm sure you do, but when we started this whole process, previously, there was times we were thinking that there would be a separate substation, or maybe it would be just a storefront, all kinds of different ways we considered that. But right now, as staff works on it, we're thinking that it would be more of a combined facility with the fire station itself. And so there's still decision points that have to be made with that.
Thank you.
Okay. If we could go to the next slide. And wanted to show this as something that's very recent and relevant for the police facility. Richardson has just completed a public safety complex. Theirs is a little bit different there. It's a joint site, if you're familiar. There's a central fire station as well as fire administration facility sharing the location in Richardson, but we've left those numbers out and just try to strip it to what would be apples to apples for Rowlett's headquarters. And so just as a comparison on the populations, you can see there Richardson at 115, we're looking at 100,000. Their headquarters number is substantially larger for that. Don't know specifically what all is in the building to have risen it to 77,000, but certainly they also have a large detention area as part of that, or separate from that. Our detention is 13,500, and those numbers have not been modified they were set prior to your most recent action as far as who you're doing an agreement with for temporary holding. The support spaces, which I mentioned earlier, are just like garage type outbuildings for kind of large and things that have smells that you would rather not have in the building. So that square footage is pretty on par with what Richardson will be installing on their site as well. So that just wanted to provide this to give you a sense of what's happening out there locally in the Metroplex, pretty close to that 100,000 horizon Rowlett will be at, but just because of their larger city and some of the nature of the demographics that come and go through their city, that may be part of the change that square footage, but that's just for your information, this type of slide. So we can.
Do we have any, is there any specific reasons for why the square footage is so different, given the 15,000 different population? Can you explain that a little further?
I am not sure. I tried my best to get, we asked repeatedly for the city of Richardson to provide us with some of their staffing numbers so we could compare those to Rowlett. We didn't have any success in order to do that. So I don't really know what their staffing levels are, and maybe they are just higher staffed under police than Rowlett even into the future. It may also include an emergency operations center number, which we do not have included under police. That may be included under police. There could be other specialized functional lab space or units that weren't being considered for Rowlett that they have need of. So unfortunately, I couldn't give you a detailed breakdown.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, that it's probably, the EOC or some other areas that we don't have and won't plan on having as part of it.
Brian, that's significantly different than what we're projecting, and I think that's something we have to understand. So maybe somebody from Rowlett Police Department could put a phone call into the Richardson Police Headquarters and find out some more information. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and they certainly apparently they're going to share the site with their central fire station, but they may have other constraints and stuff. But it would be good for us to know that, and we'll help see if we can get that
Yeah, I mean, they've got 31,000 square feet for the central fire station too. So the 77 appears to be police headquarters, and we need to understand that better.
Okay.
They might be more open to talking to chief than consultants.
Okay.
Well,
This
and
is Brownie. On the phone, I wanted to ask a question just for clarity. The police area in Sapphire Bay does not have a detention facility. Is that correct?
That's correct.
that's correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I would add that typically you would find that disparity is not driven by staffing, but probably by support areas that they have, like y'all have discussed. That's typical disparity. But if y'all want to dig some, and we may try some other channels to determine that. We have other police facilities that we've done in the Metroplex. Mesquite comes to mind. It's larger. We picked Richardson because it's just a recent opening. And so there's some other things that we can give you more peace of mind that you have the right square footage here for that facility.
Also, another quick question: is the police support building, is that property evidence, or?
it's only partial. Most of the property evidence is within the building itself. In the support building will be larger items that are just cumbersome to move in and out of a building. So putting them in a support building where there's an overhead garage door, that type of thing. So bicycles or car parts or unusual items can be moved into that space.
Automobile that is that's evidence. This as an example.
Okay, yeah, I know property evidence is important to have an adequate space, especially going into the future, given the issues we're with now in that area.
Okay. So we'll keep moving here so we can not drag into 4 and 5 hours. So under fire administration, I just wanted to note that we've looked at it in two options. Option one is to be joined with the police department as a public safety facility. And so we stripped away some of the square footage that would be in place if you were doing option two, which would be the standalone facility. So that's really the derivation in the numbers. So from what you are seeing here, on the left side, the blue again is 2029, the orange is 2039 or build out. Option one is the smaller number because it's included with police. And so we've already covered building support spaces like mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, that sort of thing. We're not duplicating those with fire admin. So that's what the number reflects. But when you go to a standalone building, then the number jumps up for that purpose. And so this does not include any equipment bays or anything like that. We are talking about training rooms and office space for fire administration. And this number also includes an emergency operations center component, which that's something I think that would be conversationally a city philosophy. But we wanted to look at the option of if the EOC should be part of this, what would be required or what would be ideal. So that's why that number is being shown here today.
This one jumped out to me as a rather large increase in staff. What was that? What was driving that?
The fire shared with us a report, I guess they had made to council a little bit earlier about their feelings that perhaps they were understaffed, and I think there were discussions both with us and without us of why. And I guess there's a feeling that where they're at now, they're woefully understaffed relative to what they need.
Well, I agree with that they're understaffed in firemen and paramedics, but not in admin. Yes, they're understaffed in admin, but not to the tune of, almost I'm not doing math right now.
Yeah,
18.
it's basically 3 times. They're saying they're increasing their staff 3 times over what they are currently.
Yeah.
For 2029.
And if those are real numbers, those are real numbers. I'd just like to see a breakdown of what that admin is. I mean,
Yeah.
making sure that they're not.
We do have that, and we have each detail sheet is just like this. So we have that will be a part of the full report, and we can issue those at your discretion in terms of what you would like to see there. Be happy to.
A lot of the growth, I'll just add here, and I don't know if Chief Howard is on, but there were quite a few that were added in the public education component to add in staff there, as well as under the fire marshal. Fire inspectors were added, and so that actually represents staff you don't have now, and they were brought in to help fill in for that department under fire marshal.
Yes, that would include fire prevention, which would be inspectors, fire marshals, help, public education folks, emergency management people, training, more EMS staff, and logistics for us. So it's everything that we would have in fire administration at that time.
But how many of those would be considered new staff? I mean, is that new staff or just staff that you're currently officing somewhere else and now they would office?
It would be new staff. It's new staff, and I think this will be shored up when we get the results of the study that's being conducted right now by ESCI for us. They'll shore these numbers up and give you justification of why we need the staff we're estimating.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the numbers.
I think it'll be real clear when they do their report of what our needs are and how it affects the need for a bigger building or more space.
Can someone explain why the EOC square footage seems to be relatively small?
I can't explain that. I don't know that we gave that number that I recall.
Okay.
Relative to the physical size?
Right, and if I'm seeing it correctly, I'm seeing 2,061 square foot.
Correct.
Yes, and part of what is setting that is just the number of space or a number of people in the active room, which was set for 20. Then we have a breakout conference room and a policy room that were part of that. And the conversations we had with the chief were about the, I believe it's Fire Station 2 currently happening that will have either EOC or backup EOC. So that was some of our conversation was related to location, what would be the primary and what would be a secondary.
Okay.
We have that level of detail, though, as part of our tabulation, that you'd be able to see that.
And Chief Howard, I mean, I think you can add clarity on that. I do remember the discussion with the breakout room. The space that we have right now obviously is way too small, but the idea is I thought I remembered it. Fire Station number 2 I thought was going to become our primary facility, but we would have this would be a secondary because we still would want 2 for backup. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The vision is to have a primary and a secondary, whether it'd be our preference to have the primary, and if we have a public safety building, to have it there, because most of us would be there, we wouldn't have to travel and use the current facility that we're building in Fire Station 2 for an EOC is going to become our primary, and the one at Station 1 will be our backup. The current facility that we're building is going to be about 2,500 square feet, somewhere in that neighborhood, with some breakout rooms, if I'm not mistaken. So, and it's got the ability to expand another 2,000 square feet as well, if we needed the expansion room, because it's it's a training room and an EOC built together. So it's got that removable wall where we can expand if we have overflow or needs. So
Thank you, Chief.
All right. And anything else? We'll move on to the next slide. So similar to the fire department, we looked at would municipal court be part of a public safety or other facility that could be just considered option one, could go in with any other facility. Or option two, if they were to be considered as at a standalone facility. So that is the numbers you see there. The first line in the light blue is if it was a combined facility with police or public safety would be 12,336, but ultimately for build out 12,511. If it's a standalone facility, that bumps up just a few hundred feet to 13,206 would be the ultimate number for a standalone facility for municipal court. Any questions there?
Jenny, you might touch on how many courtrooms that includes.
Oh, well, I'm not sure I can recall let's see.
You have the information there.
Apologize, I don't have that printed. But I
think
can get
that's
it really
typical.
quickly.
Yeah.
We have, it's really just one large courtroom.
Yeah, I don't have any belief that we would need multiple courtrooms.
Right. It's just one courtroom with court waiting, which is something they do not currently have. That was one of the largest complaints, of course, when we talked with court, was just the lack of ability to manage the public prior to coming into the courtroom. And so that was part of the conversation there.
How big is this courtroom supposed to be? Do you have any idea?
We have seating planned for 90.
Okay.
So that would allow them for, say, a jury panel, a jury call to handle that as
So
well.
this would also include office space and the lobby and the check-in. Okay.
Yes.
That's why the square footage is a bit high. Okay.
Yes. We also have added in witness waiting space and a conference space for attorneys to meet with clients, so they're not just standing out in the hallway and that sort of thing. And then prosecutor office and city.
Just when I went over these numbers before, I'm just going to make this statement. You know, our facilities that we currently have for court are extremely small. I mean, you know, even our judge is in a closet for her office. We have built a small area for the prosecutor to use. You know, this is our opportunity to make the space more efficient, and so I think, you know, this is what we're looking at. We've made do, and I'll just put it bluntly. In every building we've had, we've made do, and this would be the way it should be built out, particularly when you look at that population number and the amount of people who pre-COVID would be coming into our courtroom.
So Brian, you know, one of the things we need to talk about here is, you know, separate building from what or who. You know, I think we could combine the court with like City Hall, but if it was a decision of being combined with police headquarters in court, then that's a different animal and probably shouldn't be combined. So I'm not really sure where you all are going down that path in that decision making, but it's very important that we understand combined with what, and then be able to make that decision.
So Mayor, you know, the conversations that we've had is at least where I would like to see us kind of start to head down the path of is kind of having a campus facility on land we already own, because I believe there's enough space to do that. And if we were to say build our public safety facility on one side of the city and City Hall on another, and combined with court, I think you're going to have you're going to have some issues with transporting detainees that need to be to go in front of court. If you have a campus setting, that might make that a little bit easier. But I think that one single issue is the main reason why so many places combine their court in a police building or a public safety facility, because so they can transport the prisoners within the facility and not outside. So it's a conversation we still need to go into more in depth. For tonight, I think what we're starting to understand or see from the information is at least sizing of what we think the size may be. But if we end up, the location will be important, because if we split the facilities up into two separate areas of the city, I think it's going to be really difficult to be able to to manage that.
I never said anything about two separate areas of the city. I just said separate and apart from police headquarters. If you have a campus, you can keep them separate.
I know. I'm just telling you where we went with it.
But one of the ways that cities have done that, and Plano is a great example, is you actually have two distinct entrances, facing different sides. So, if you're not really looking, you don't even notice they even really connect, but they kind of connect in the back, not through the same public lobby.
Right.
So that's a great question, because you want people to feel like they're getting proper justice, not going through the lobby of the police. But so a lot of people we put courts actually having a distinct entrance, so it has its own presence, but it's still physically connected through the back way for staff to come and go, especially police to come and go to court, and as well as detainees.
Yeah, and I absolutely understand that, and it's just not a very good situation we have today, because you have to go into the police station lobby to go to the court, and that we shouldn't be doing that. And like I said, Brian, I didn't say separate parts of the city. I said not separate buildings or whatever. It's just, to me, this is a three-pronged question, not a two-pronged question. Mm-hmm. Is it part of another facility, yes or no? And if it is, which facility, and how is it structured? Mm-hmm. So it's not an option 1, 2. I think it's an option 1, 2, 3, and we got to talk about that.
Yeah.
And Mayor, it's a good point. I mean, it's really kind of why, at least before we go a different direction, I certainly would want us to have a conversation about a combined campus, because I think in a combined campus, it will open up options and opportunities for us to share space, and also to be able to build facilities like that could be interconnected rather than connected. But the reason I bring it up is that because we've also had some conversations about other areas that we may build some of our facilities, and I just see that one as an operational issue if we build this public safety facility in a different area of town. That was all.
And we need to first and foremost consider our residents and the people that have to go to the court above and beyond our operational decisions, because they shouldn't have to be walking into a police station.
Right. I understand.
Right.
And Mayor, just to reiterate, on that option 1, it does say with public safety, but in essence, it could be any facility. So don't want that to be clouded. And we can change that to be option 1 joined with another facility instead of public safety. That might keep it clean. And
I would like to say, I mean, it's a good point that that you do have officers often having to go to court, and so convenient proximity is, I think, important for operations. But to the mayor's point, you definitely need for people to feel like when they're walking into the court that that they're not walking into the police station, and that the court is just a part of that, because I think that's intimidating to people. As a matter of fact, I know it is. And so maybe the solution is separate entrances, or maybe a corridor between standalone buildings. I don't know, but taking the opportunity to separate our court and police lobbies is really important.
We would agree with you on that, for sure.
If we'll move on to the next slide then, if we are got that, I think everyone's feelings covered there, and we'll certainly move the rest of the facilities we have really taken a look at as standalone facilities, what they may entail. Public Works is an unusual animal, and so we wanted to present that and break it apart as there's a main office building that has essentially all the personnel, private offices, workspaces, ballroom, staff support spaces like locker rooms and break and kitchen spaces within that. And then what the secondary number area includes is all of their support spaces, covered storage and garage, all of those goodies that need to be kept out of inclement weather and those sorts of things. So those have all been taken into consideration for streets and traffic, water and wastewater, fleet, as well as facilities. And so all of those numbers are put together. Looking at 2029, that total number, essentially there's not much difference in the 2 years. So we're looking at a target of 37,700 square feet for the administrative space as well as the garage. So that does not cover, of course, the site storage element that would be added in, but we have those calculations as part of when we're looking at parking requirements. So this is just strictly the built facilities. And we looked at considering a fuel island as well, and a car wash, equipment wash bay on the site. Then the next slide. And then some of the other standalone facilities, similar to.
Can you wait a second?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, this is Mayor. Laura, can you back up one? One of the things that is important, I think, on Public Works is square footage of land, not just buildings.
Yeah.
Is that, am I confused? Is that on here?
No, as I mentioned that we are not in this slide, we do not have included the calculations for site storage, such as materials and poles and anything that is not covered, that is just out in the open, that it needs to have storage, as well as the heavy equipment that's parked or vehicles, that sort of thing. We do have that calculated. It's just not, the numbers you see here are for actual vertical building.
Okay, but that's first and foremost in our planning needs of figuring out the total square footage of the sites we need, so.
Understood. And we have those.
Same things for like parking, Mayor, for the facilities, those kind of things. I mean, there will still be work that needs to be done.
And
But that's especially true of standalone facilities. You're exactly right. The ones that may go on a student campus, we have opportunities for reduction in parking if, in fact, we co-locate some of these facilities together. But the standalone, for sure, the land area should not change, and we do have that information.
so I have a question concerning the areas where they work on the vehicles. Have we taken into consideration the lease option that we're looking at for Enterprise when we're looking at the space that's needed for that?
No, Martha, this was pre-COVID when they had this. So, clearly, if we're gonna run a major garage, then, you need more space and more employees. The enterprise option could end up changing what we end up doing. Now, I know we haven't had, council approve it yet. We haven't had the formal presentation yet, but if we go there, that may change how we repurpose our fleet facilities in the future. So
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
We can go to the next slide then. And so again, as I was saying with the animal services facility, as the mayor noted quite rightly, there are site requirements that go along with this type of facility as well. And those have been considered in our overall snapshot for standalone facilities and what they would need for parking, as well as the vertical structures. So what we've got here is the vertical structure. For animal services, the public lobby and public interaction spaces with the animals denoted, as well as all of the support spaces for animals, the kennels, the cleaning rooms, the storage rooms, all of the ins and outs that would be needed in that facility. And then exercise yards and storage, again, are not included there. This parks maintenance facility, which is in need of quite a big improvement, their space, which is mostly open workspace and storage and equipment. Internally, some of that is conditioned space, but a large majority of it is non-conditioned space. And so that is a number you see there at 9,451. We also have indicated for park maintenance their yard storage here. So I can get that same number from for Public Works to include that, which will give you a better sense of the site requirements, Mayor. Also, then we spoke with Parks Administration and their space requirements growing into the future. There had been some conversation about where their location might be. So currently, of course, we're looking at continuing their presence at a recreation center, whether that's the community center or something else in the future. But this just captures what that space requirement could look like with the staffing additions listed there, going from 8 to 18 and just over 55,000 square feet, or 5,500. Pull that back. Any questions on those? Not, we'll go forward. The slide, please. So this is just bringing our numbers together at present, which, as a few questions have noted and highlighted, is that there are opportunities for changing some of that square footage and slimming it down. But essentially, the numbers which are in bold, not italics, I'll say that, are what is included in that totals building needs. So the bottom line number at 2029 is almost 225,000, and for ultimate build out, the number is 231,256. And this includes kind of the largest square footage that would be built. And so we looked at a standalone court facility as well as a standalone fire administration building. So those numbers would drop depending on how we looked at combining and joining departments under one roof. And then we did want to take a snapshot. If you'll go to the next slide, you'll see a look at what might happen for a municipal campus. And so we just pulled potential occupants to that site and looked at what those numbers would look like. So option one is really just considering City Hall and their number at 62,145. If the Municipal Court was added in, that would add in 12,511 more, so you're going up to 74,000. And then option 3 is bringing in the police facility along with court and city hall. And then the larger number is, of course, bringing in fire administration and emergency operations center under that scenario as far as what would be on the campus. And so those are just for consideration to give you a sense of what the numbers start to add up to for those iterations of occupants on the site.
And Mayor, the things that we're showing here, we could also develop a table for you for land area requirements for these. That would include parking. And that'd be very easy for us to kind of put that together so you could better vision what this means in a totality sense of land area. And I see that's kind of the next step. We were trying to just show you the process and the magnitude of the buildings at this point, but the next step is the obvious point of where does it go and how does it go. So all those are great points you brought up, and we'll certainly get that done.
I think the reason I asked about it for Public Works is, it's easy for us to look at our buildings and we know how short we are on building space and building needs. An additional significant weakness, lack of land space in our Public Works area. So it just really is one of those areas that I think will really show this is the kind of land space we do need, and this is what we currently have, and there's a big problem there.
Right. Good point.
Well, at this time, we want to turn over and put our focus on the library and the study that was carried forward along with these other departments. For Rowlett and Marine Art is with us, has been part of our team and conducted all of those interviews and with staff as well as public and city staff. So Maureen, we will let you, if we'll advance it, and that'll start her show.
Thank you, Gina. And thank you, Mayor and Council and everyone. It's nice to see you all again. I wanted to start the library portion of the presentation by just giving you a brief history of the library facility to kind of set the stage for where you've been and where you're headed to. Originally, the library was on 3900 Main Street, where the Rowlett Village is now. It was approximately 15,600 square feet, and your population at that time was 31,000 people. After the agreement was made to expand your downtown with the village complex, the library moved to 5702 Rowlett Road. And that building was retrofitted and was approximately 11,000 square feet. So it got smaller. And then I guess it was about a year and a half or so ago now, you moved back over to the library village into 12,000 square feet. So bigger than the previous temporary spot, but smaller than the original library. But you were up to almost 66,000 population. And of course, this was always meant to be a stepping stone, and your lease expires June of 2023 with the option to extend an additional 2 years if, in fact, you decide to do that. So if we can go to the next one, please. So the library approached the needs perhaps a little differently than the other facilities because it is such a community-centric building. And so in addition to staff interviews that we did extensively, we also had 2 open community focus groups and had nearly 60 people show up to the library for those 2 focus groups. We conducted 9 leadership interviews, which included a lot of you that are here today. We did an online survey with the community, and then we took that information and overlaid it with benchmarking information, as well as state and national standards for library space. And then the word cloud that you see is something that the community helped us build at the community meetings They each gave us 3 words of how they wanted to feel when they came into the new Rowlett Public Library. So friendly, inspired, and calm were the most popular adjectives they'd like to use in their new space. Okay. These are some pictures of the community participating. You can see, although I don't think we counted the baby in the front row, we did have toddlers to grandparents participate. We had a really good range of ages and diversity. And what the community did, and what you can see them doing on the right-hand side, is after we gave them a virtual tour of library possibilities, they helped us set priorities. And I've got those top 10 lists on the next 2 slides. So next slide, please. So 8 of the 10 community priorities from the in-person focus groups all were around meeting spaces. So top priority, large multi-purpose space. Second priority, a technology classroom. Third priority, small reading nooks. Fourth priority, even smaller individual study spaces, a place to sit. And number 5 was a dedicated children's story room that really came out in the needs assessment of needing more space for children and teens. Next slide, please. And here it is, teens. Number 6 was a dedicated teen space. Number 7, another technology space that would allow a place for people to record podcasts, to edit videos, to create video content. Number 8 is the flexible program space. So that's the picture on the right-hand side. That is the Seguin Public Library. Their shelving, all their shelving on the first floor is on casters. So it can be rolled out of the way to allow programming to happen inside the library. This happens to be from the groundbreaking. Number 9 is an early learning opportunity for kids. And then number 10, rounding out the meeting spaces, is the high-tech study room, one of the most popular things that we're seeing in libraries today. Okay, next slide. So these are the 9 in-person interviews, and there were some common themes that started to emerge from talking with you all. The biggest one being that the library should be a community gathering space. And that really reflected what the community told us in the in-person focus groups as well. You wanted unique spaces like maker spaces, but not in a way that competed with business, but helped elevate education. We wanted the new building to send a clear message to the community about the confusion over the previous moves, and to keep the hometown feel. And more places to sit came up in not just the interviews, but the community meetings as well. Okay. So in addition to doing the in-person interviews, we wanted to give as many people as possible the opportunity to participate. We had 471 responses to our online survey. This just tells you a little bit about who responded. The frequency of visits. So the orange were people that came weekly or bi-weekly. But we also had a couple of slices of people that came once a year or never. And those are some of the people that we really want to hear from about why aren't they coming to the library. By large majority, Rowlett residents. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is the range of ages. And you can see it's a really nice distribution of different age people that participated. Next slide, please. So from the community survey, we also got a top 10 list. So the difference between the in-person, we were able to give people a virtual tour of library possibilities. An online survey doesn't do that. So often people give a response for what they know. And so the top vote getter from the community online survey was checking out books. And that was still an important aspect of the library from the in-person, increasing the collection. It just didn't make the top 10 list. People come to check out movies and books. They want to be able to sit, attend programs, do homework, use a study room, access the internet, copy machines, adult programs, and computers. Okay. So we also asked, why do you not currently use the library? And the top response was insufficient parking. So to the mayor's point about making sure we plan adequate space for parking, and parking that is visible to the library entry, because we know the insufficient parking really is a perception and not necessarily a reality. It's based on where the parking is for the current library. Limited collection was next. No place to sit. We know this is an issue. When I was visiting with library staff, especially teenagers, they have nowhere to sit in the library, so they're sitting between stacks and on the floor. They do really need a place to sit. Not enough tables, same, too crowded, too loud, not a good location. And this is probably some of the people that don't use the library, they just aren't aware of the services. Okay. And so what services do you want in a new facility? And I highlighted the top 10 that overlapped what the in-person community meeting said. So quiet reading, multi-purpose room, study rooms, family and early learning areas showed up with both groups of people, in addition to things like comfortable seating, drive-up materials, more power, and outdoor reading spaces. Next slide, please. So this was an important question because a lot of the respondents do use other libraries. The biggest reason was a bigger collection. And if you are familiar with your library, you know that the library staff has squeezed a book into every possible inch of that building, but it's still not quite meeting the needs of the community. That was by far the top vote getters. The others were fairly minor: convenient location, better facility, different programs, quiet space. Next slide. So this starts to share with you some of the Texas library standards. So like the other facilities, we use the same population projections for the current 2019 for 2029 of 80,000, and for build out at 2039 of 100,000. The state of Texas provides an average square foot per capita for populations of your size, and that average is 0.51 square feet per capita. But they also provide 3 levels of service, the lowest being standard, medium enhanced, and the top exemplary. So looking at your building today, to meet the average, you would need to grow from 12,000 square feet to almost 34,000 square feet. And to meet the top level of the Texas standard, you would need to have about 66,000 square feet of library space. And at build out, those numbers would be 51,000 square feet for the Texas average, and then 100,000 square feet to hit the exemplary mark. So the standards really are just a rule of thumb, and they don't dig really deeply into detail. And so that's what we tried to do next, to test those standards. So next slide, please.
That's, oh goodness, this
Yeah.
is one of those issues. I apologize.
Would it be okay if I shared my screen? I have the
It shows up on
PDF
yours.
left. It does, yeah.
It shows up on mine as well. I apologize that it something went wrong when it got to the city.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. So we started to look at some benchmarking numbers. So currently, Rowlett at 66,000 population, you have 0.17 square feet per capita. So remember the Texas average is 0.51. If you do nothing in 10 years, you'll be at 0.14. And if you do nothing until build out, you'll be at 0.11 square feet per capita. So the other thing we did was pull benchmarks, and we looked just like the other facilities did at communities that are 100,000 people. So looking at your build out population for comparison. But we were also looking for communities that have one outlet. So you won't see McKinney on here because McKinney's library system has branches, which is a whole different animal than what you have in Rowlett. And then the other thing that we looked at is, for example, we know that Allen is at 0.46 square feet per capita, and they passed a bond a few years ago to double their square footage. So the blue that you see are building expansions of planning that we know are underway at the moment. So all of your peer libraries do or will meet at least the average square footage per capita, and many of them will hit the exemplary square footage per capita when their expansions are complete. Next slide, please.
You've got the screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Laura or Tina. So the other thing that we can look at in terms of library, unlike your other buildings where it's really kind of office buildings, we wanted to look at collection size, seating, and technology as kind of the three main components for libraries. So this is the collection numbers for 2019 at your population of 66,000. Your current print collection, so the physical collection, is 74,585. What the library wants to plan for is about an 80% physical collection and 20% digital. So digital doesn't take up any space, but it counts for the collection size per capita. So per the state of Texas, for a community of your size, an exemplary collection is 2.79 pieces of pieces of material or digital material per capita, and the enhanced is 2.41. So we did break it down in terms of looking at the exemplary, so the higher level, 80% physical of the standard number is about 148,000 volumes. So almost exactly double what you currently have. And then this number shows you the square footage that you need in order to house that collection. So just to house the library collection is about 20,000 square feet for what you need it for 2019. In 2029, you need about 24,000 square feet to house the collection, and that build out between 30 and 35,000 square feet, depending on your goal of enhanced or exemplary. So seating is a little bit trickier. The state of Texas does not have a standard. Other states do, and they are broad in their range. They range anywhere from 3 seats per 1,000 population up to 12 seats per population. If you live in Wisconsin, apparently you get more seats in your libraries. So working with the library staff, we identified 5 as a goal. So not the lowest, and not even close to the highest standards that we look at. But based on your current population, you should have 331 seats in your library, and you currently have 72. So you can see the disparity and the challenge for people using the library currently. By build out, you need 500. And then this shows you the square footage. So at build out, you need about 15,000 square feet just for seating. The state of Texas does have a standard for technology. It's 1 computer per 1,500 population. So currently, the library offers 15 public computers. State standards say you should have 44, and it goes up to 67 at build out. So this chart takes all of that information, subjective and objective. So the spaces that we need to have, like common areas, the lobby, the restrooms. It takes into account the meeting spaces that the community told us that they wanted. It takes into account the collection, the technology seats, and staff work areas. So the state of Texas indicates their standard is for a single location library that staff work areas should be about 25% of the library space. It's smaller if you have in a branch, if you have branches, because there's not as much staff there. And then like the other buildings, we use the non-assignable space, 25%, which covers things like stairs, wall thicknesses, corridors, mechanical rooms, things that aren't listed in this short summary. So at the exemplary level for collection, having all of these meeting spaces, 500 public seating, public reading seats, and 67 technology seats, we come up to about 90,000 square feet needed at build out for a library space. And this is that same chart again that shows you what that addition, the total 90,000 square feet would get you up to standards with your peers. That was a lot of information. Do any of you have questions, comments?
I guess I'm just stunned. So are you saying that Allen, Louisville, Richardson, Round Rock, they have in their libraries seating for 500 people and computer space for 75? I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess I've not really visited those facilities, but that seems overwhelming to me that they would have that in their library space, but maybe they do.
Well, they're significantly larger than you. The technology standard to me is one of flexibility. And so as we're looking at communities where schools are giving students a device, people generally have their own device. In fact, we know that most people bring 3.5 of their own devices into a library. I think there's some flexibility when we look at that part of the number in terms of what we're planning. Is it actually a library provided PC, or is it a space for you to plug in your own devices when you come to the library?
So could you back up to, I think maybe the slide right before this one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have.
I mean, those are just stunning numbers to me, that you would have basically a combined meeting and public seating and tech space for about 1,000 people in one library. That's really shocking to me, and shocking that cities we're comparing to in build out already have those.
Well,
Yeah.
they don't, Martha. They have that in their planning.
Okay. Okay.
Right,
That's
so the blue
great.
is still, yes, in progress.
The gray is what they have, and the blue is planned in whatever stage of planning that is.
Mhm.
But, one of the things, yes, shocking, Martha, shocking to me. We can want exemplary all we can want, and we're only going to be able to do what we can do. And we have a lot of priorities, so we got a lot of discussion to have. But one of the things that surprised me and does not make sense to me is why we're looking at 80% materials and 20% digital in today's world, in 10 years from now's world, and 20 years from now's world. That doesn't make sense to me.
I agree.
So I don't think there's anybody from the library on this call, but one of the reasons for that is the expense of digital materials to libraries. When the library purchases a physical book, it can be checked out as many times as you want. When the library purchases a digital book, it can be checked out 6 times and then it has to be repurchased. And so that's part of the reason that that number has stayed as low as it is, that we can increase it, but the book budget has to go up to match that increased cost.
Well, the book budget's going to be lower than the building costs, so it's just something we need to look at. And
it's definitely a balance.
Brian or whomever, that kind of assumption to me doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that, Mayor. And also, that may be today's pricing, but I really do feel like that as our populations move to a more digital format, that those costs have got to come down.
So I know the American Library Association has been working on that. If you have any contacts with the publishers, that would help, because they haven't been easy to work with.
Oh, I'm sure. Same with the music industry. That was a big,
exactly.
But
regardless, you don't make facility decisions 20 years out based on today's digital world.
No, but Mayor, it's a really good point, because this to me is a facility where you build it with the maybe not just to today's standards, but what your needs are, and you build it to be expandable.
Right.
Given all that all of our needs to build a 90,000 square foot facility today, when that is not what our needs are, is not really where I think we should go. But to build a facility that could be expanded in the future, I think is absolutely essential.
Well,
Yeah, and I'm just saying, I think some of the assumptions need to be looked at more closely, because they're in full build out assumption, because I don't think where they need to be.
yeah, I agree with that. And, even needing to be at the 40,000 square foot today with the standards, I think that's pie in the sky. So I agree that we need to look at what the future is with libraries, and if there is a need for that much square footage.
One other comment I'll make before Maureen moves to this slide is that, you're taking all this information from the people who use the library and what they would like to see and why they even use other libraries. And you start to understand that, the desire for, teen space, the desire for, a separate, children's reading room, seating. I hate going to a library that doesn't allow me to browse. And if I have to stand up and browse for a long time, I'm not going to be there a long time. And so, it is, well, I guess what I'm saying is what we've heard from the community, what we've heard from staff is probably very true. It's just a question of how you prioritize that with all the needs. including our library. We've seen, and I think you're going to continue to see growth in the technology area. It's just really, kind of capturing our community's vision for the library. And, this is a starting point is what this is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Brian. And one of the things that we talk about when we start library planning processes is the need for flexibility because things are changing really fast and the library needs to be able to pivot. I mean, I would love for you to go and visit some of the peer libraries, but this is a terrible time to do that because they've moved all of their seating out into the meeting room because they're not letting people sit in the library right now and use it the way they typically do. So when things get back to normal, I think that would be a great field trip to take. But that does bring us to what the options are. And of course, building 90,000 square feet is, of course, an option, but we can also look at it in terms of building a building that is expandable in the future. So that also gives you the opportunity to look back and see how much more is available digitally, how much is your population using it digitally. One of the things that librarians like to say is that they have a long tail. And what they mean by that is that they're not on the cutting edge of, their users are not on the cutting edge of technology typically. And so they're holding on. Most of the libraries I'm working with now still have audiobooks on CDs, which my teenagers don't even know what that is. But those are still high checkout items for libraries. So that's one option to look at. A site that can accommodate an expansion in the future, an expansion for both the building and the parking and site amenities that go with it. The other option that was discussed with the community groups and in the staff and leadership interviews was about the idea of 2 regional libraries. So based on the shape of your city, having one library on each side of kind of the finger of the lake that pops up there, so that you have 2 bigger spots for libraries. So the D being the future location. We did talk about a library system with branches, and while that gets library services into a lot of neighborhoods, it's a lot more expensive to operate in terms of efficiencies. There's duplications of staff, of collections, of computers, of programs. And so that's why number 2 is crossed off. So I would love to hear your thoughts on what you all think is the right direction.
Well, I've said before that with a city that's only 22 square miles total, I would think that maybe focusing on one central location, especially just with the assumption that that the digital offerings are going to get much more expansive and users more sophisticated as far as using that. But myself personally, at least for this next 10 years that you're looking at, I would think, it looks like we're so short on just our one location that we have now that I think I would concentrate on expanding that to our community. With 22 square miles, you're not going to have to go very far to get to a central library.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the trends that we're hearing from a lot of communities, because we're so used to going to one location and getting everything that we want when we want it, that when you have different locations, you may have to drive to a second location or wait for something to be delivered to the location you want it at. When there's one location that is full service, that seems to be the trend of a lot of cities.
Are you done with the presentation?
Yes, they're just, if Laura, I think, would take back over their 2 slides, really just wrap up. If not, I can share oh, okay. If you'll go down to 51, I believe. Yes. That's perfect.
Not that one.
You know, I guess the summary here is let me get my screen out of the way, get my face out of the way so I can see it. You know, the city has, oops. There you go. The city has, you know, several opportunities. I mean, like any fast-growing community can't do everything at once, but you have several opportunities to fund projects over the next 9 to 10 years via probably bonds and maybe other ways, but certainly bonds in terms of 2021, 2025, and 2028, let's say. Uh, you know, and obviously y'all have mentioned this word already. There's priorities that will have to be made, and some of the priorities are probably partial priorities, but that's really the thing that is kind of facing you now and faces every community like yours. That's a positive community. Is how do you parcel this up? How do you may even have flex spaces that within your community that allows you to continue to provide services in an improved manner with that main building that you want. So those are kind of the hard decisions that y'all had before you, and we're here to kind of help you make those decisions, give you the information that you need, and you've identified several of those pieces of information tonight. And as city manager identified, we're not really asking for any decisions at this point, but really trying to lay this out for you at first and let you kind of absorb it. And, you know, some of the thoughts y'all have already had, I think, are spot on. So that's really where we're at now. We do have a note there for follow-up questions that you might have to us and to Maureen.
Can you pull the presentation down so we can see everybody's faces, or do you have more of the presentation?
Gina,
Really, sorry, go ahead, Dwayne.
I think we have one more slide that actually talks about the next steps. And next steps are basically taking this information, letting y'all respond to these things so we have kind of a set priority of where we're going. Like some of these spaces, perhaps library we need to relook at, perhaps you identified maybe fire as a question mark, the police comparison between Richardson as a piece. So we have some homework to do ourselves, but once we have that, I think the next step we take is basically start looking at the sites, getting direction from y'all in terms of potential sites that we could have. And you know, there's a sizable property that you have that's on the east side of Toll Road, and that's a potential municipal complex that we're prepared to start looking at to see how things might fit on that, or if there's other directions on site that we would need to know that as well. So there are several big picture questions that we would need direction from council on to be able to proceed forward.
So council, what additional questions do you have for staff or for the consultants?
I don't really have any questions. I think you hit on a lot of the stuff that still needs to be figured out, but I'm excited for them. This was good analysis, and we needed this analysis to get started, but I'm really curious about the next part of is where could these potentially possibly fit? What do we currently have that might be able to reutilize? If we do a new public works compound, are we planning on keeping that compound? Could that be a place where then parks could move into? How do we start to shuffle all of the pieces? I don't even think we know we know now. We have one piece. We have what our needs are, or at least we are almost there. We got some things we need to figure out. Then we need our other piece of what's our land available, and then our other buildings and what's their availability, so that we can kind of start to see how that puzzle goes together and some different options. And that's what's going to be able to, I think, help make some decisions in terms of future bonds, which is where we eventually need to get to. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. But I mean, this was a really great first step and a really great first analysis.
Thanks, Matt. One of the things that, I think surprises me is how much meeting space that we need in a library facility and how much meeting space we need in city facilities and on and on and on. And I'd like to see how we could share some of that space at the beginning, with expansion possibilities, because we can't do all this. This is unbelievable, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, and this is going to take a while to get us where we need to be. So I would like to see some kind of plan on how to best share common space as we phase this in over the next couple of decades.
Mayor, it's a good point you made in one of our earlier discussions was particularly if we can, I'm not advocating for that tonight, I'm just saying that, a campus setting could give us an opportunity to share that kind of space, particularly training facilities or public meeting space that, that I would be interested in exploring. Because again, if the more standalone buildings you have with, the more standalone space, then you add square footage to be able to do all that. And there may be some opportunities to combine some things.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think we've asked all our questions, and I think you've got some additional research to do and information to provide us. And it was I agree with Matt, it was a good presentation, really puts a stake in the ground of what, best practices will be with full build out. Now we just got to figure out the right roadmap and the right timing and the best way to do it, and the most effective and efficient, and utilizing our taxpayer dollars very prudently. So.
All right.
Anything else, Brian?
No, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. And Dwayne and Gina, thank you guys, Maureen, for y'all being here tonight. Think it's a good start.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate it.
Night, everyone.
Thank you.